Hi everyone, it's Gary here, and a very warm welcome to the fourth official. And you can see we've got a very special guest with us this evening, star of the Real Radio Football Phone In and countless other football mediums over the course of the last 20 odd years, local radio and STV Radio superstar, let's call you, Ewan Cameron. Ewan, welcome to the fourth official.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on. Superstar. I've been called many things in my life, but I've not been called a superstar, so I'll definitely take that. And if that's a sign of things to come, this should be an interesting evening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We were just speaking off air, and I used to listen to the Real Radio Football Phone in back in the day via Satanta Sports, which for people that are young enough, ask your dad. But that's where people used to watch Scottish football back in the kind of pre-BT Sport days. But was probably the first thing that I can ever remember where radio was actually seen on the telly, or
Yeah,
properly kind of seen on the telly. And obviously, you and Ruffy had brilliant times with that program over a number of years. But having that exposure of being on Satanta at the time as well must have given you a much bigger, broad of audience and kind of wealth of people coming on to that platform.
it was. It was a strange time because it hadn't been done before, where an actual radio show was being broadcast live on television, and particularly just two guys sat in the studio taking phone calls for 2 hours. But Ruffy and I had started the football phone in 2002, no, 2003 we started it. And when we first started on the football phone, and I can't believe it's over 20 odd years ago, um, Clyde and Clyde Super Scoreboard were the big dogs. I mean, there was nothing that could touch Super Scoreboard at that time, and they were massive. And we stepped into the market, just Ruffy and I on our own. We didn't have the rights to the football. We didn't have any commentary rights. We didn't have any big names that we could call upon. So we started off on Real Radio, just Ruffy and I, and it was really, really tough to begin with to sort of like make any inroads into denting the power and the influence that Clyde had at that time. And what we did, we spent a season just kind of like, it was like walking through mud, if I'm being honest with you. It was really tough because there wasn't much of an audience there. And then we decided to just throw money at it. And what we did is that we brought in Frank McAvenny, we brought in Andy Gorham, and we brought in Gary Mackay. So that was Celtic, Rangers, Hearts covered. And we also had Alan Ruff. So we had Hibs covered as well. And they came in at the start of the season. I think it was around 2004, something like that. And we instantly got quite a few people interested in the show, and then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then what we found out through the data over time is that the shows that Ruffy and I did on our own during the week were getting bigger audiences than McAvenny, Gorham, or even Gary Mackay. And we ended up just removing them from the show, and it just became Ewan and Ruffy in the Real Radio Football
Yeah.
Phone, and because that's what the punters were enjoying. It was just us two having the banter, having an opinion, having a laugh with the callers. So we turned the show into what I would describe as going out for a drink with your pals in the pub. You'd sit in the pub, you'd start talking about football, but then you'd go off on wee tangents like you do when you're out with your mates, and then you get
Yeah.
back to what you originally talked about, which was the football. And the show just went like that. It just went through the roof and became the number one football show in Scotland. And because it made such an impact, because of our style and the way that we did it, we got a phone call one day from Satanta Sports saying we'd love to broadcast the show live to the UK and Ireland. We're like, "Fuck, okay, right, let's give that a go." The cameras were installed, it went live, and Satanta Sports, the only time anything beat our show was when Celtic and Rangers played on the telly. But we beat Hearts, we beat Motherwell, we beat Hibs, Dundee United, any other club out with the old firm. Our show got more viewers than any other Scottish football match. That's how popular the show was, and I'll forever be indebted to it. I mean, it was a massive success. We won countless awards, and it was a very difficult decision to leave. When I did leave in 2011, it was my decision to walk out and move to the breakfast show with Kat on the same radio station. And a lot of people ask me, why did you leave? It was flying high, it was doing really well. And I've always been of the opinion, and I know I'm talking quite a bit here, but I was always of the opinion that, see, when you hit your ceiling and there's nowhere else for you to go, you've won the awards, you've got the audience figures that are through the roof. The only way once you've hit that ceiling is to go down. And when the opportunity came to do breakfast and step away from football for a wee bit, I just jumped at the chance because I thought I want the legacy of the show to remain, and it has remained, because even to this day, it's the one show that people talk to me about moments, incidents, callers, music that we play, like the X-Files theme tune when conspiracy theories were going all over the place. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think I've told many people this. I don't even think I've said it public, but there's been 4 separate occasions since 2011 that radio stations and other media have tried to get Ruffy and I back together, and I have always rejected it. I've always turned it down. And the reason I've turned it down, and this is nothing against friends of mine who work on Still Game, when Still Game made its return, the first series was good, the second series not so good. And what happened then is that people go, it's not as good as I remember. It's not as good as I remember from back in the day. And that was always my fear, is that people, if I was to go back with Ruffy and do a show now, or when we were asked 5, 6, 7 years ago, is that people would listen to us and go, God, it's not as good as I remember, which then in itself ruins the legacy and the warmth and the love that people have for that show.
Yeah, it'd
So
be like someone asking Scotty McClue to come back and do Scott FM all over again. I think
just
it's
wouldn't
a
work.
time or a place thing, and
That's it. It's exactly that.
But listen, it's not as if there's much happened in football in 2012, so you probably picked a good time to can it.
I mean, to be honest with you, that was I mean, I couldn't quite believe it when that happened, because I'd just left the season before, and then that all kicked off. And do you know what? I mean, I'll be honest with you. There was another reason why. There was a few reasons why I decided to walk out on football at that time, because I was going to all the media conferences as well. I was turning up at Murray Park, and I was turning up at Celtic Park. I was going to the games. I was travelling all over Europe with Celtic and Rangers as well. I was fortunate enough to go to European finals with Celtic and Rangers and travel with the fans, and became friends with a lot of the fans at Celtic and Rangers over that period of time as well. And I'm still friends with those people that I met on those trips. But I don't know if you remember the season. There was a lot of I've never, in all the time that I worked in football, I had never known it to be as hot, and there was just it wasn't a good time in football. There was a lot of bigotry going on at the time. There was a lot of stuff that was happening in the stands, off the field, on the field, that I just didn't like at all. And we weren't that football show where we wanted to concentrate on that all the time, because we were about the banter, having a bit of fun and all that stuff. But you can't ignore the controversies that were going on around that time for a season or two. And I wasn't enjoying it as much as I was. And don't get me wrong, we never, ever backed down from the big stories, and we would ask the tough questions, and I got myself into a lot of trouble as well. But then there comes a point where you're in that goldfish bowl, and when an opportunity came to get out of the goldfish bowl and take a wee rest from being on a football show in Glasgow in the West, across the Central Belt, I just thought it was a perfect time to get out. So there's a multitude of reasons as to why I walked away from football at that time. But I'm delighted to be back involved in some capacity. It's not as big as it was when I was doing the Real Radio Football Forum, but I'm still very much involved in football, and I've still got a lot of friends in football. And it was nice, and maybe you'll touch on it later, but it was nice to meet up with David Murray again recently. And I know a lot of Rangers fans don't like him, and they've got their opinions on him. I can only speak from my own personal opinion with David Murray. But doing the David Murray interview that I did, and the stuff that I did with Steven Gerrard when he first arrived at Rangers a few years back, it was nice to be back and involved in that capacity, dipping my toe in every now and then. And right now, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm enjoying the banter with the fans on social media, Old Firm fans, Hibs fans, doesn't matter. I just love the banter. And as long as it stays like that and it doesn't get out of hand, then I'm all in. But as soon as you step out of line, I'm either going to block you or I'm going to mute you. I'm not going to entertain you. But I do love football, and it will always be a part of my life, 100%.
Yeah, and as someone that's a frustrated wannabe breakfast radio DJ, I can get that. As I was saying off there, that was always the dream for me coming out of uni. So I mean, to be a breakfast radio DJ is pretty much the pinnacle of anyone that wants to work in radio. That's the show that you want to do. That's the goal. That's the be all and end all, is being on
Well,
breakfast. So
but you say that it wasn't for me. I genuinely believe that my career and my life was going to be football from the moment I stepped into football. Now I was working in the Middle East, and I came back to Scotland to work on Real Radio and to work on the football phone in. And I genuinely thought that was my life. That was going to be me right through. And as I said, what I think it is, right, and I'm very critical of the media in Scotland. I really am, because I've always seen myself as someone on the outside looking in, and I don't like how the media, I'm talking about the football media here, worked. I'm not saying it now because I don't have the experience of the football media right now, because I'm not in that environment. But when I was in that environment for 10 years in the noughties, I didn't like the clique. I didn't like what I heard. I didn't like how it operated. And I was always on the outside looking in. And I think, the best way to describe it, that goldfish bowl of working in football in Scotland, um, it just got to that point where it's like, nah, I've had enough of this. I'm sick and tired to the back teeth of the shit that was going on behind the scenes as well. I mean, one day I will write a book and I will tell all the stories about um, what happened and what I experienced, what I saw, what I heard. I've some stories I've told at dinners, etc. But yeah, it just got to me after a period of time, and maybe because I refused to be part of it. I refused to
yeah.
be part of the cliques. So that's why I stepped away from it. But I did think that my life was going to be football full time in Scotland, whether it be in radio or television. Um, but no, I chose a different path after I'd hit that ceiling at Real Radio, and I wasn't interested in going anywhere else. There was other chats with other media organisations to go and do football elsewhere, but I knocked that back. I had a young family, I had my wife, and we'd just settled in to living in Scotland again. So we made a decision, or I made a decision, to join Cat on the Breakfast Show. And don't get me wrong, it's been a brilliant decision. I've loved every second of that. But there's always that little thing in the back of your head about doing something in football.
Yeah.
So I still need to dip my toe into that little thing that I've done for a number of
Hmm.
years, and I enjoy it immensely.
And I think the thing with the Real Radio football phone and the memories that people have got of it, it was almost a bit of a precursor to this kind of fan media, kind of podcast culture that we all kind of find ourselves in now. And obviously, I'm very grateful of, because it's given me the platform to do what I do. But that's very much what the best ones are, is replicating down at the pub with your mates, as opposed to kind of being dictated to as, I'm telling you this because I'm learned and I'm educated and this is what it should be. For me, that's not entertainment. That's not what people want to hear. We want the ability to kind of replicate fan culture and to be able to be as if you're talking to your mates. And I think that's the best shows. And that was always the real appeal of yourself, was that even though it was blatantly obvious that you were a Hearts fan and that was nailed on, but you could have that banter with other fans of other
Yeah.
teams and still feel as if it's not a them versus us culture, which we've got very, very prevalent within Scotland, probably more than anywhere else in the world. But that kind of tribalism that we see within Scottish football, but it never really came across that way in anything that you were involved in.
No, it was fun. It was harmless laugh, harmless banter, but I would always still, I'd upset people because I was very strong in my opinions. I upset managers, I upset chairmen, I upset owners. I was banned on numerous occasions. I was banned from Celtic. I was banned from Rangers. I was banned from Hearts. Vladimir Romanov banned me from Hearts. The SFA under the late David Taylor banned me from Scotland matches because and what, like, I think what you said is true. I think we were kind of like, we the way that we conduct ourselves and the way that we did the show is that we allowed fans a voice. We became like fan media in a way, because as much as I respect what Clyde were doing at that time, it was that attitude of, I know better than you. And I thought at times they would talk down to the caller or to the fan because they had a, whatever it might be, they were a journalist or they're a former player or whatever it might be. We decided to take, it's not like we decided it, it just happened that way because that's who I am as a person. You respect everybody and you respect everybody's opinion. You can disagree with that opinion, you can argue about that opinion, you could even think that that opinion is full of shit and that that person is an arsehole, but you allow them to speak and have their say. And I think what we did was give the fans a voice, and by having that platform that I had, I felt it was my, not my duty, but I felt like it was up to me then to take that fan's frustration, whether it be a collective, i.e. Rangers fans weren't happy for, or say, for example, about McLeish, what was going on with McLeish when Hearts split the old firm that season. There was a lot of talk about get McLeish out, blah, 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 blah. And he was under a lot of pressure. I would take those frustrations and those questions from fans that I would get on the football phone and take them to McLeish because nobody else was doing that, because they were all very protective of their friends, and i.e. maybe the friend was Murray, maybe the friend was Alex McLeish or somebody else within the backroom staff, because they were scared that they weren't going to get their little phone call like at 8 o'clock at night to tell them about a signing that might be happening or break a story or an exclusive. I didn't give a shit about that. So I would take those fans' questions and take them to McLeish, and it didn't go down particularly well a lot of the time. And I had a few run-ins with McLeish. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore McLeish. Brilliant guy, lovely guy. I thought he did a remarkable job at Rangers as well. But there was a couple of times where he pulled me aside at Murray Park, pulled me into his office and have a few words with me, to either give me his opinion or to set me straight on something that I may have got wrong or that a punter may have got wrong. And that was fine. And that was a relationship that I had. So, yeah, I have always believed that the football fans should be respected and they should be listened to. And that's why I got really, really angry with Jim White recently, who said for me things on Talk Sport that made him look like the dinosaur that he is. And I called him a dinosaur. I went after him on Twitter. And look, I think it was 1.4 million people got involved with that particular tweet. And it forced Jim White to get, I'm sure you know him very well, David Edgar.
Yeah.
And it forced their hand. It forced their hand because they had to revisit that, because the outcry from not just football fans across the country, but football fans who are in fan media, they had to address it. They could not ignore that football fans have to be respected and fans have every right to be in that football club, in that media centre or in that media room to ask those questions that I would have asked, because you have an understanding of what is going on with the football fan. You're in there, you're in amongst it, you're hearing it, you're in the pub, you're in the stadium, you're in the buses. You have every right to be there, more so than any person from the media, more so than me. You have more right to be there than me, than a Keith Jackson, an Andy Devlin, or whoever it might be. It doesn't matter. Your Tom Englishes, all these guys, they can all get to, because at the end of the day, it's about the fans. And the fans have to be respected. Whether you agree with them or not, they have every right to be there. And that's why I got really angry. And I went after Jim for a couple of days because I thought he had to face up to what he said. And he had to give either David or someone from Celtic State of Mind or whoever, get both on and let them speak for themselves and explain to him and educate him as to why fan media is an important it's what's important for all football clubs to have some representation.
Yeah,
So,
and I think there's a big difference between the likes of what they do and your Arsenal TVs, your Mark Goldbridges that are just clickers rather than actual people that are actually trying to be the voice of the fans and be the voice of the people. But that's not real media. That's not real interaction. That's
clickbait shite.
Yeah. And it's not what we do, it's not what the good people do. And I think that there's a real distinction between that and obviously the sites that do very, very well are not that, because I think there's one thing, I know David wouldn't mind me saying this, but one thing he always said was he would never run his site for fans of other teams to come and laugh at my pain, because that's not what we're all about. They make a hell of a lot of money doing that, but we've got a bit of integrity that's not what we've looked to try and do. And listen, the first 3 months of this year, as a Rangers fan, have been awful and really, really difficult to produce content on a daily, weekly basis. But we've been there and we've done it, and we've tried to present how all the fans are feeling. And obviously, you're benefiting from that at the moment as a Hearts fan, because you're getting to see, obviously, Hearts taking advantage of a really poor Rangers and Celtic at the moment that are
correct
in a bad place, and Hearts are doing a lot of things right at the moment. And I think
the
from your
only thing
perspective,
that I'd
long may
say
it continue.
the only thing that I would say to that is, I've got a wee bit carried away, but it's also, listen, taking my Hearts cap off, a bit like Aberdeen last year. I did actually put an Aberdeen cap on because I just think it's great for Scottish football. And I got excited when Aberdeen were up there because I just think it changes the narrative a wee bit and it's good for the game. And it was nice to see like Match of the Day 2 talking about Aberdeen. It was great hearing Gary Lineker and Alan Shearer on their podcast talking about Aberdeen. But as soon as Aberdeen fell away, the interest in Scottish football disappeared because it's just Celtic again winning the league. So from that point of view, even with my Hearts hat off and an Aberdeen hat on, I just think anyone up there who's challenging, doesn't matter whether it's for 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 weeks, 20, it doesn't matter. At least they're there right now. Let's enjoy that moment, and hopefully it can last a wee bit longer than Aberdeen. But I just think it's great for Scottish football. And you mentioned David Edgar then. I hope he doesn't mind me telling the story. But when I was doing the football phoning, I was always on the football forums at that time, and they were in their infancy because it was like kind of like the start of the internet and all that stuff. So like follow, Celtic Minded, Jambo's Kickback, Hibs.net, all these websites. And there was a sticky kind of like thing at the top of the page, and it was the RST, the Ranger Supporters Trust. And I'd click on that link just to see what the Ranger Supporters Trust would say and what their opinions were when it came to Rangers and the running of the club. And they were really critical, I mean, properly critical of David Murray and the way that he was running the club at the time. And they were very much in the minority with the trust. There was a lot of Rangers fans that were they didn't agree with David Edgar, didn't agree with what the trust stood for, didn't agree of the questioning around David Murray and the way that he was running things. So I thought, if I get David Edgar into the football phone in, could I stir that hornet's nest up enough that David Murray will be forced to come and speak to me? So I kind of used David to stir up that hornet's nest to see if David Murray would appear. So what happened was I phoned up, I can't remember who it was I spoke to, but somebody put me in contact with David Edgar, who was a spokesperson at the time for the Rangers Supporters Trust, and invited him into the show. And that night, when we announced it, obviously Follow had put it up that David was going to appear on the football phone, and it exploded. And David, and fair play to the guy, and I'll always thank him for it because he also took us to another level. Because what he did when he came on the show that night, he was so well prepared, and he had an answer for every question about the running of the club, the car park, you name it. He could give you an answer to everything. Rangers fans were coming on and shouting him down, telling him he's this, telling him he's that. He's not a real Rangers fan and all that stuff. And he was brilliant on night. And it turned out he was so good that I would invite him back at least once every couple of weeks, because there was always something at the time surrounding Rangers or some sort of controversy going on, like Gwen and Smith coming back. There was loads going on with Cleach, signings, what have you. And David always did me a turn. And he did it from what he believed to be his truth. Now, at the time, I wasn't sure of any of the problems that were going on at Rangers. I wasn't sure of what was going on. All I thought of Rangers was hugely successful club. They won 9 in a row. They had all these amazing signings, all these great players playing great football, sell out, close to getting to a European Cup final and everything. But David was really critical of Murray, and I'll never forget it. I think it must have been about 6 months or so into us getting David Edgar on the show regularly. And I was in my house, I'll never forget it. I was in the kitchen, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was leaving to go to the studio for about 3, so I had about an hour left to go, and I was making a cup of coffee, and my phone rang in my house, and to this day, I've yet to ask him the question, but it was David Murray on the phone. I don't know how he got my number. I have no idea how he got my home number. I'll have to ask him that next time I see him. And he phones me up, and he goes, as David does, "Hello, it's David." I was like, "David who?" I didn't quite recognise the voice. "David Murray." "Oh, And I kind of like, I'll be honest with you, kind of shat it then because I know what David's been saying. And now I've got what I wanted, which was stirring up the hornet's nest. David Murray says to me, he goes, I just want to set the record straight about something that David had said the night before. David had been on the night before. And a couple other things that he'd said in the past. And I stopped him and I went, David, more than happy to give you the right to reply. Can I come and interview you? And he said to me, what are you doing tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I goes, nothing. He goes, well, be in Charlotte Square for 10 a.m. and I'll do a sit-down interview with you. So I went in at 10 a.m., did a sit-down interview with him. And what David Murray doesn't know, which you might hear about now, is that after the interview, not after the interview, before the interview, who did I contact? I contacted David Edgar, and it was his questions that I put to David Murray.
Oh.
And the reason that I did that is because I needed to sound informed and I needed to hear the answers to the questions that David Edgar and the Rangers Supporters Trust wanted answers to through the Rangers support. I think there must have been only a handful of questions that I personally came up with, but the vast majority of that interview that I did with David Murray that made front and back page headlines came from David Edgar, because I needed to ask David those difficult questions. And in fairness to David Murray, he may have had an inkling that those questions weren't directly from me because of the detail that were in them. But what I will say is about David Murray, and I know there's a lot said about him, I know there's a lot of people that don't like him. I've always enjoyed his company. I have a good relationship with him. But never in all the years I've known David Murray, in all the years that I've sat and did an interview with him, has he ever asked me for the questions beforehand. Also, he has never once, in every interview I've ever done with him, he's never asked me to remove anything. Nothing. And I'll tell you what, he's one of the only, and in fact, I think he's the only one that I've ever interviewed that has never asked the questions in advance or an idea of what's coming. Sometimes they don't want all the questions, but they want an idea of where you're going so that they can mentally prepare possibly about what might be coming around the corner. David never did that. And I think David is one of 2 or 3 people in my entire career who have never asked me to edit anything out. The vast majority of people that I interview, I don't want that in, Key, take that out, no, don't ask that. I've had people step in front of the microphone and say, you can't ask that. Never had that once with David Murray, not once. And I won't. The reason I want to tell you that is because I think there's a lot said about Murray and about his relationship with the media, etc., and his control of the media. Did he ever control the media? Yeah, he did to an extent. And I could go on all night about that. And I could tell you lots of stories about that, about my phone pinging halfway through shows or 10 minutes into a show. Murray would be on to me a lot on the phone while I'm doing the football phone in. And if sometimes when you're watching Satanta and you see me looking elsewhere, that's because I'm looking at the phone because David Murray was messaging me about either a signing or something, this or something, whatever. But for me, David Murray is one of the best operators, one of the best speakers that I've ever encountered when it comes to football. The guy's unreal.
That was when, very recently, obviously, when David Murray resurfaced after going very quiet for a number of years in the aftermath of the Craig White sale. And to be fair, you didn't shirk away from asking the questions about Craig White and all the due diligence that appeared not to have been done with regards to Craig White. And obviously that then blew up incredibly.
Yeah. Can I just say, just again, people think I'm defending David Murray, or your pals with David Murray and all that stuff. Listen, David Murray knows he did wrong and he made mistakes, and we all know that. But see, when it came to Craig White, this again something I've never told anybody, but I'll tell you. I was the first person to ever speak to Craig White, and how that came about. I was my final year on the football phone-in. I phoned up David Murray after the show about something. I was driving home and I phoned him up and he answered, but he was still in his office in Charlotte Square in Edinburgh. I think there was chat about Craig White at the time, or there was rumours going around about it. And I think I asked him about Craig White or something about Craig White, somebody I didn't know or had heard of. He went, hold on a wee second, you can speak to him. And he handed the phone to Craig White across his desk in Charlotte Square to me. And I'm like, oh, hello. And I could hear David in the background going, something along the lines of, you'll be dealing with like me once you're in, or words to that effect. And I was kind of like, it was surreal. I mean, it was surreal. And Craig White said a couple of wee things, but I just think I was taken aback by the whole thing, that the guy was actually sat there. And I wish I could remember when exactly that was, but I was probably one of the first media people to speak to him. Yeah, it was only a few words, right enough. Just on the off chance that I phoned David Murray after the show one night. But what I would say about David Murray and what happened there in regards to the interview that he gave me that kind of blew up, I had been in contact with David Murray quite a bit over the years. Like once a year, I'd phone him, just say, how are you getting on? You okay? What's happening? Basically, what I was doing was wanting that interview. And I just wanted to remind him that I'm here.
I think we all were waiting for it, because it had gone so quiet for so long. And the number of questions that Rangers fans would have had, that would have wanted to put them to David Murray, and as every year went by, it was, well, are we ever going to hear any sort of kind of recompense or anything from this for actually what happened? And it was amazing when it came out, because it was almost kind of closed that chapter of what happened.
Yeah. So what happened was, I'd phone Murray every now and then, or drop him a wee text message, just like, how are you getting on, etc., etc. And I was at the Edinburgh Festival, I think it was like 2-3 years ago. I was at the Edinburgh Festival. I was in a hotel at the Edinburgh Festival, and I was staying overnight. And I don't know, for the life of me, I have no idea why I thought of David Murray. I was getting ready to go out. It was a lovely sunny day. And I was like, I'll give Murray a phone, see what he's up to. And I phoned him, and he picked up within a couple of rings. How you doing, David? Oh, fine. All right. How are you? How's the family? How are the kids? Usual, that kind of thing. And I think he was actually on holiday at the time. I think he was in France. And we're chatting away for ages. And I went, David, I'm going to, and I'd never really asked him about doing an interview at that point. I never did it. I just kept in contact with him without asking him. But he knew with me that he could trust me not to do the dirty on him, in the sense of that I would ask the questions and there would be no
no spin, no agenda,
no agenda, that kind of thing. Yeah, and allow him to give his answers, and then other people can say what they want about it. So for the first time, I said to him, I goes, David, are you up for a chat? Would you like to sit down and have a chat with me? And he says, right, I'm going to make you a promise, but you can't tell anybody. I went, what's that? He goes, I'm currently writing my autobiography. And when the autobiography is done, I'll phone you. 2 years later, 2 years later, he phoned me up on a Friday, out the blue, phoned me up on the Friday. He went, how you doing? Fine. Yeah, I forgot all about this. Yeah, fine. He goes, what are you doing on Wednesday? I went, what am I doing on Wednesday? I go, I'm not doing on Wednesday. He goes, can you come round to my house? Remember that interview I promised you? I went, yeah. He goes, well, we're doing it on Wednesday. What the fuck? What? Right, 5 days from now? Yeah, we're doing it. I went, who else is doing it? He goes, just you. I went, fuck. You know what I mean? It was like, shit, the interview that everybody wanted. Now, he was going to be doing other press, but my interview was going to be the first one. And I had to get it right. So that's the David Murray I know. He's a guy that kept his word, remembered me, phoned me up. Yeah, he still did the guys on the BBC afterwards and blah, 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 blah. But I took that as a compliment, that he trusted me to come in and ask those questions, but not to have any spin on it, and to do it with honesty and with integrity. Now, look, there are some people who were critical of some of the questions that I asked, and maybe he gave him a bit of a soft time of it. I don't think I did. I asked the questions that mattered. And he got a wee bit riled at times, but he didn't mind that. He didn't mind that. He wanted to be challenged, and he was challenged. And,
and he must have known that would be coming as well.
100%. And do you know what else I think he did? Because I went to his house and we had a bit of lunch and we chatted, and during the chat, I never talked to him about anything about what I was going to say or ask him. But I think the reason he asked me to do it first is because he knows I would make it difficult, and then that would prepare him for everything else that was coming afterwards. Because of our relationship in the noughties, where I would go after him or would allow David Edgar to go after him, that I was going to give him a hard time of it. but not in a horrible way, not in a nasty way, or in a way that's an agenda that I'm trying to spin it, or to just get a line for the sake of getting a line. Just ask the questions that matter, that the fans want answers to. Now, whether or not you're happy with the answers is irrelevant to me. That's up to you to decide what you take from his answers. There's only so much you can ask a question, and you can ask a question many different ways, but you're always going to get the same answer. So again, nothing was taken out of that interview. He was top notch. He did admit to me that he was nervous ahead of it, because he hadn't been in the public domain for such a long time.
Yeah.
And he was nervous ahead of it. But we sat there for well over an hour. Well, as I say, the rest is history, and it went great. I don't think it's maybe changed the opinions of many Rangers fans, if I'm being honest. I mean, looking at the feedback, and I checked follow, and I don't think it had that much of an effect on what fans ultimately think of David Murray. And the other thing that I kept very quiet is, and I've seen the pictures, and I'm aware of. He showed me things as well that, again, I've never spoken about. But he was very close to death around the time that Craig White took over the club, and I have seen those pictures of the ventilator, the tubes and all sorts that he was hooked up to. And I'm not making an excuse for David Murray here as to why he walked out in Rangers when he did. There's obviously loads of different reasons for it, but his health was also obviously one of them. And he mentioned that in the interview with me, and I saw the evidence myself. But he made mistakes, and there's no doubt about that. And I think it'll go down as one of those. I think it's one of those interviews that I'll always look back on and think, could I've done that better? Could I've asked that? Could I've been a bit harder there? I don't think I would change much about it for the first time of him speaking in like 12 years or whatever. I think, generally speaking, I was quite happy about it. And I mean, I was also really happy to get it, because you then get all the fucking newspapers, and you get all the TV channels phoning up going, can I get a clip? Can I get a clip? You just go, do what you want with it, but as long as we get a credit, I don't mind. But again, it clearly worked, because every news channel wanted it and used it. But
massive story, so you can understand why it blew up the way it did, because it was the one thing that everyone
did it change
wanted to
you?
hear.
Did it change your opinion of Murray?
Not particularly,
No.
but as I say, I've been a season ticket holder at Ibrox since 1992, so I've been old enough to remember when we were good, and when things were good, and all the way through the 9 in a row, and Walter and Manchester and McLeish and trebles and all that time, and then the bad times down the leagues, and Craig White and Mike Ashley. So been there, been on that roller coaster all the way through.
So like you, I had the best of it as well, because when I was in football for that 10 years in the noughties, I was dealing with Walter Smith. I was dealing with Gordon Strachan. I was dealing with Martin O'Neill. I was dealing with Alex McLeish. I was basically dealing with the creme de la creme at that time, and the players. I mean, let's remember the players were around at that time as well, that I was
100%.
dealing with and talking about and interviewing and travelling around Europe with them. I mean, I went with Celtic on their official flights and with fans to go to Seville. I did the same for Rangers on their road to Manchester. I travelled all around Europe with them. I was there in Lisbon that night, etc., etc. That Whittaker goal, just the way he waltzed through to score. I was there that night when Novo scores a penalty. I was there that night when Larsson scores a goal against Braga. So, like you're saying, those were the best of times. You know what I mean? It was a brilliant rivalry. There were some amazing football matches. It was just a great time to be involved in Scottish football, because there was a lot of good going on at that particular time. And you look at it now, and it's just, for me, Celtic are just far too dominant, and the sooner that dominance is pulled back a bit, where there's a bit more of a challenge. Now, I know that nearly came last season. Was it last season with Clement, when you got ahead of Celtic, but then you couldn't see it through. But I think Scottish football needs it. It needs the Hearts, it needs the Hibs, it needs the Rangers, and a strong Rangers as well. So that Celtic don't get it their own way all the time. But I loved it in the noughties. I really, really did.
I think you've just got to watch time stamping this a little bit, Ewan, but obviously we just came off the back of an international break. So Scotland, Belarus, which would get football stopped, I think, in most countries from what we were watching last night. But it's a very Scottish thing to just see 2 wins, but go, it was awful and dreadful. But it's 2 wins, and it's getting Scotland closer to a World Cup. We've not been there since 1998, so it's very Scottish.
Yes, it is. It wasn't great. We got the 6 points, but if we play like that against Greece, we'll lose. If we play like that against Denmark, we'll lose and we'll end up in the playoffs. We just have to take the shackles off and go for it. We have to take the shackles off. I think Steve Clark, for me, has always been a bit too cautious for my liking with the players that he's got at his disposal, because I think we've got a great bunch of lads. I think they're very talented. They're playing in some of the top leagues in Europe. I just think the shackles are on. I just think we just need to release the shackles. We've got the playoff space sorted. That's the worst case scenario. So let the boys go out and play, and hopefully we get the 2 results that takes us to the World Cup. But if we go with that approach that we had in Stuttgart against Hungary, then we ain't going to get to the World Cup. He's got to change. He's got to change to get us to that World Cup. Because if we don't get through in the group stages, I think we'll struggle in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think in one-off games we'll struggle.
Yeah. So a couple of things before we round things off, Ewan.
How long are we speaking for? Oh my God, it's 40 minutes.
Aye.
Talking shite
that's
for
what
40 minutes.
We wanted it to be just a kind of off-the-cuff bit of a chat, but there are a couple of things that I do want to kind of mention before we kind of round things up.
Go on, mate.
First of all, so this bit of whether it's banter, whether it's back and forward or not, but this perception of being a Rangers fan in disguise as a Hearts fan, where did that originate from? Where did it come from?
It came from my relationship with people like Murray and that's where it came from. But I was accused of being a Celtic fan as well in the noughties, because I was travelling around Europe with Celtic, and I also had the number of Peter Lawwell at the time, and Strachan and Martin O'Neill, and it swings and roundabouts. I mean, do you know what I mean? You get accused of this, you get accused of that, you get accused of that. I think the thing with Rangers is, I was in Manchester, right? I was there in Manchester. And that caused a bit of a start in Manchester itself, because in the lead up to the UEFA Cup final, I was hosting the football phone-in, and we were talking about how Manchester doesn't have a fucking clue what's about to hit it. It didn't have a clue. And when I heard the stories and the rumours were coming out that they were just going to entertain the Rangers fans in the city centre, I phoned on the show the council in Manchester to say, you're fucking off your head, basically. Get them into Heaton Park. Have a fan zone in Heaton Park. Put up a big screen. Get them all into Heaton Park. But they didn't believe the numbers that we were telling them. They didn't believe the numbers that they were telling them. So when what happened on the night, right, and I've always had this opinion, this is not just Rangers, instances that involved Celtic, instances that involved Hearts, and I was there that night when Neil Lennon was attacked, and I'm really good friends with Neil Lennon. I've got a lot of time for the boy. I think he's brilliant. He's one of the best characters in Scottish football. But I was there that night, and what I've always hated and I've always defended is the majority. Do not castigate every single football fan in a stadium for the actions of a few, or the actions of a one, or the actions of some fucking idiot who was at Aston Villa and threw that firework onto the pitch when Celtic had a ban hanging over them. They might not get to Bayern Munich, etc. Yet still one fucking idiot throws a firework onto the pitch and nearly cost Celtic fans the chance to go to Munich to see their team in the Champions League. You don't castigate and you don't punish an entire fan base because of one idiot. You get the one idiot, you name and shame them, you ban them, you deal with them. So I was always of the opinion that you cannot castigate an entire fan base. And I did that in Manchester, and I got a lot of stick because obviously what we witnessed wasn't great. But we're talking hundreds of thousands of fans were down there who behaved themselves.
Yeah.
Why are you describing every Rangers fan as a quote unquote animal? This, that, not blah 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 blah. Then the Manchester Council came out. So I was really, because I was in Manchester, I was really defensive. And I was really defensive because it's not just because it was Rangers, it was a Scottish football club. And Manchester had failed. Manchester
Oh,
had
big time.
failed UEFA, they failed Rangers as a football club and its fans. So there was a radio station that phoned me because they'd heard about me. It was a Manchester radio station. They phoned me up and he goes, "Would you come on drive? We've got a councillor on, right, to defend." And weirdly, it was a councillor that I phoned to warn them about what was going to hit Manchester,
Wow.
right? So I get on this radio station and I rip this individual to shreds. And I ultimately blame them for what happened in Manchester. Now, I'm not saying those idiots, those individuals, those animals that behaved in the way that they did, there's no condoning that at all. That's condemned outright. But Manchester themselves failed in regards to putting on the event. That was my point. You failed in regards to putting on the event because you didn't heed the warnings of what was coming to Manchester
Yeah.
that week.
Well,
They
I was
should have had
in
any.
I was
Were
in
you there?
Piccadilly Gardens that day, and right up until about 5 o'clock, and I was lucky enough I had a ticket, so I left about 5 to go up to the stadium to go to the game. It's a game I've never watched back, but for obvious reasons. But up until 5 o'clock, it was a great day. Other than the
I was.
fact it was very,
I,
very hot, and there
yeah.
wasn't a
I,
lot of stuff to drink
I,
anywhere apart from
yeah.
people that were able to
I was in
enjoy.
the city. I was in the city centre up until about 5, quarter past 5. Then I made my way up into the stadium. During the game, I heard nothing. Heading back from the game after all the media conferences and interviewing Walter Smith and Davy Weir and people like that. Even heading back down to the hotel, I heard nothing. It wasn't until I got to the hotel and we were in the bar that there was things going on in the TV, and then you start to hear whispers of some trouble and things that happened, and there was a screen that didn't work, and this and that. Listen, there's no condoning what some fans got up to, but the fact that Manchester themselves didn't expect that is it's on them.
Yeah,
That side of it, because it was so poorly organised. I mean, it was awful. I mean, it was terrible. And do you know what I think it was ultimately? I think they probably had an idea, but I think they thought that they could deal with it. And the amount of money that would be going into the city centre, the amount of money that would be spent would be great for their economy in the city centre, blah, 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 for businesses, etc., etc., etc. That's what I think it was about. I think it was just about the money and how much money would be coming at that city centre, and not just having out in Heaton Park where a few stalls and other people are making the money and blah, 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 blah. I do think there's a lot of that
possibly.
to
Yeah.
that was going on at the time, and councillors and Manchester people didn't particularly like me for it, but I didn't give a shit because they were basically dragging Scottish football through the gutter. It was the same. There was an incident involving um, the Hearts fan at the at Tynecastle. Neil Lennon's right in front of me as well. And I interviewed Neil Lennon after the game and all that. But again, it was like Hearts fans, Hearts fans. It's not. It was one fucking idiot. It was one idiot. It's not the Hearts fans or the support. It was one idiot. And I think there was an incident involving Dida for AC Milan and Celtic, and a fan ran onto the pitch, and then Celtic got heavily fined for that. And I was like, why are you fining the entire club and its fan base for something that one individual has done? I've never understood it. Maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe I have got it wrong, but I've just never understood the idea of punishing an entire football club for the actions of a few.
It doesn't stop it from happening again in the future. So like we've
But it
seen that
doesn't.
with all the pyro fines and everything. We
So
see
saying
it every game now. So
The Celtic Pyro guy at Aston Villa, what are you thinking? I mean, honestly, what are you thinking? Anyway, that's
to
moved my
round things
soapbox.
up, Ewan,
Yeah.
obviously just now personally it's a very exciting time for you with a new project on the horizon. What can you tell us about STV Radio?
We're nearly there. STV Radio was announced in May. I was working at Fourth One, Clyde One, Greatest Hits Radio. I'd been at Bauer Media for 10 years and loved it, absolutely loved it. It was a really tough decision to tell the guys that I wasn't going to be renewing my contract, etc. That there was a new opportunity that came along to launch a new station from scratch, to build a new station from scratch. It was just way too good an opportunity to turn down. Is it going to work? You never know. I mean, every decision you make in life's a gamble and it's a risk. me leaving Dubai to come and work in Real Radio with the Football Forum was a huge risk. So, but I like taking a risk. I like taking a gamble and seeing where it goes. So, we've built the team. More announcements for presenters are coming up soon. Towards the end of the month, the studio's in a really good place right now. We're just waiting on the equipment arriving to fit the studio out, but everything else is done. It's been gutted. It's got the lighting in and the TV screens and blah 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 blah, the soundproofing walls and all that. So that's all set to go. But yeah, we're more or less there. It's, as you can imagine, with people that you want to hire, whether it be producers or management or whether it be presenters, they're already in jobs.
Yeah.
They're currently in jobs, so they just can't walk out of a job to walk into another job. There's notice period to be done, etc., etc. So it takes a wee bit of time, but we will definitely get there sooner rather than later. And I'm also going to be bringing back a new football show, and a new football podcast and a football show to the radio station. And also, I've kind of hinted at it, but I was known for the football phone, and so the Saturday football show that I'll be doing will also have a football phone-in on it.
Nice.
So I'll be back doing the football phone-in on a Saturday afternoon.
Wee bit of a full circle moment.
Full circle moment. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Aye, totally.
Ewan, it's been an absolute privilege and an honour to have you on. I've thoroughly enjoyed that this evening. Wish you and the station all the greatest of luck. If you don't yet follow Ewan on Twitter, why the hell not? It's the best interaction fun that you can have on there. So I thoroughly encourage you to do so. But no, I appreciate you giving up your time to come and speak to us.
Cheers, buddy. All the best.
Thanks very much.
Great, mate. Thank you.